We had a number of questions regarding the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the budget for those wars and the Pentagon. We'll try to get to all of these, but let's start with this that hits a little closer to home. Can you each take 2 minutes to comment on the proposed closing of the Joint Forces Command in Norfolk? And is this an appropriate way to reduce the deficit? Clearly a major policy decision with a lot of political implications. We'll start with Jeff Clark.
Well, I'm from the Tidewater area originally, and I know how important the military is to the economy in that area. We see it shift almost on a monthly basis as ships return. Sometimes you have an influx in a single day of over 5,000 people. It will certainly harm the economy if Norfolk loses that base. But with that said, if we've exhausted every other opportunity to cut costs and to trim the deficit, then we have to be willing, even if it's going to affect our pocketbook, to look at making common sense decisions. Is closing the command the right decision? I'm not sure that I know that, but I do know that it will be an economic hardship on the people of the 5th District, and certainly I wouldn't encourage them doing it now. And maybe that's something we can look at in the future, but certainly it's going to affect Virginia as a whole. It's not just something that affects Norfolk. It's going to have far-reaching effects across our state. I would hope that right now they would keep the base open, reconsider it, and maybe look at it later from a more critical point of view and see maybe where else we can come up with savings. There are several hundred military bases in Europe right now. Why are we looking at closing bases here? Why can't we close some bases in Europe and start to bring those bases back here and start to instill or start to utilize the economic incentive of those bases? Think about what a single medium-sized military facility could do for Martinsville and Danville alone. It could have a tremendous economic impact. So I think when we're considering closing bases, it's not always looking at the bases or the large structures here at home. We can start saving money doing it small and medium-sized bases, and maybe look at bringing some of those things back here to the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Congressman Perriello.
I would not support closing it at this time. I think, like with the base closing commission that I mentioned earlier, it's easier for people to understand shared sacrifice when it's getting us to an end goal like a balanced budget. And I think, particularly in this economy, we've seen some real potential hits to that part of the Commonwealth. There's also an issue about moving a carrier unit to Florida, which I think has more to do with Florida politics than necessarily national security, but those are decisions that we've gotten involved in. But I do think, and I would agree with Mr. Clark, I think we're seeing a real potential in our area, both around Central Virginia and Southern Virginia, for low-cost ways that some of the defense work can be moved out of the so-called blast zone and high-priority areas that currently exist. We've certainly seen a tremendous job just north of Charlottesville with a number of jobs coming in. Not just that those are good jobs that make our country safer, but also the tremendous effort that the Department of Defense and others have done to look at sustainability, to look at road design, to look at ways to minimize the eco footprint. We're really seeing very cutting edge stuff, and we are seeing more defense contractors come in around that. And I do believe there's the potential, once we've gotten that far down 29, to look a little further south into areas like Danville and Pittsylvania County, whether it's data storage or other things where you're looking at a much lower cost. So instead of looking at ways to outsource things overseas, maybe we can be insourcing some of this work to lower cost parts of the United States, areas that have been devastated by trade and other activities. So that having been said, I do think we've got to be honest about the threats that we face. They are not going away. They are not hypothetical. We have people who really do want to hurt this country. We have the issue of proliferation of nuclear and other high-risk materials. And I think we're going to need to see investments in our intelligence and our diplomatic presence, as well as our military presence that continues in those efforts. The cheapest wars are the wars we don't have to fight in the first place because we've done the intelligence and diplomatic work. So I think this will continue to be an important area of investment for the United States, and I believe that Central and Southern Virginia is an area that can be part of that equation.
Thank you, Congressman.